space between all the things unseen and this reckoning. And I know I will never be alone. And I know I will never be alone. There'll be another in the fire standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters and holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me, I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. And I can see the light in the darkness as the darkness bows to him. And I can hear the roar in the heavens as the space between west and I can feel the ground shake beneath us as the prison walls cave in. But nothing stands between us, nothing stands between. There'll be another in the fire standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters and holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding how good you've been to me, I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be.
Good morning. If Jesus were to walk in your space right now and ask you, what do you want me to do for you? What do you want Jesus Christ to do for you? That's the question he constantly asks people as he walked around in ministry. He'd look them right in the eye and he'd say to people, what do you want me to do for you? What do you want Jesus Christ to do for you personally? If he were to sit down and look you right in the eye and ask you the question, what do you want him to do for you? If he asks you, would you say it? Would you even know what it is? Now, this last few weeks, we've been looking together at what Jesus Christ came to do in this world and that had made headlines. And we found out that although Jesus was the best teacher and that has ever walked in this earth, the main thing that he came to do was not to teach, although he did some incredible miracles, some very, very outstanding miracles. He didn't center what he came to do around those miracles that he completed. Jesus Christ came first and foremost to connect us to God and to give us eternal life and to change people's life. That's what he came to do. He came to give freedom to people who felt trapped. He came to give forgiveness to those who were carrying guilt of sin in their life. He comes to give a future to those of us who feel hopeless. He came to give life eternal to those who are going to be eternally lost. Now in John 9, as we look at something else Jesus came to do, we're going to look at how Jesus comes to bring light to dark places. And as we look at this story, like last week we gleaned on the story of the woman at the well, as we look at this story, we're going to look at the story of a blind man. And this story made headlines. because it caused quite a controversy, not only with the people that are close to Jesus, but through the whole city or this whole town that that he performed this miracle. Now, all of this life, we talk about this blind guy. All of his life, he could not see. All of his life, he suffered from physical darkness and inability to see. And Jesus Christ comes into his life and helps him to see not only physically, but most importantly, spiritually. Now, as you look at the story of this man's life in the first few verses of John chapter 9, and I really would encourage you to do that because we don't have time to read the entire chapter, but I promise you this, you read John chapter 9, it will just amaze you and awaken you. One, of how Jesus healed him, the uniqueness of how Jesus healed the blind guy, how the people reacted, how the religious people acted, and then the climax of what Jesus really wanted to do for his life that he could not do for himself. So here we're going to read about this guy in John chapter 9. Jesus healed his physical blindness, but he takes the rest of the chapter to do something even more important, to heal his spiritual blindness and to help him see truly for the first time. Now, this story of this man is really the story of how God can help you and I see something that we have never seen before. It's really the story of how God works the process of faith into our lives. Now, to make this real, to make this most beneficial for you, I'd love for you, in your outline, or maybe it's where you are right now, I'd like you to fill up this blank. I'd love to be able to see, fill it in. I'd love to be able to see my health get better. I'd love to be able to see my marriage get better. I'd love to be able to see my career take off. What would you love to be able to see God do in your life? Now, to benefit from this, you have to put yourself in the place of this blind man. He was born blind. All his life, he had been unable to see. He had been probably a beggar all his life because of this. And don't you think that every day of his life, at least once, he must have thought, man, what would it be like if I could see? What would it be like? How could my life be different? How would things change for me if I could only see what's out there? But I can't. What would you love to see in your own life, in a spiritual sense and in a personal sense? What would you love to see God do in your life? See, things that you want, but you just can't see how they can possibly happen. Maybe it's, I'd love to see my marriage getting better, or I can't see it right now, and I admit it, but I would love to see that my marriage getting better. I'd love to see myself as a person of faith. Other people talks about it so easily. I just can't see myself doing that. I'd like to be able to see that, but I can't. Oh, I'd love to see my life being used by God. I'd love to be able to do great things for God. I'd love to see myself filled with joy. But right now, I just can't see myself in that. What would you love to be able to see? Write it down, because this is when it gets real. You see, when you know, it helps what Jesus is going to say to us this very moment. 4 things happened to this man. After Jesus helped him to see, 4 things happened that helped faith come into his life. And friends, it is the same 4 things that need to happen in our life. First, it was the breakthrough from the either-or thinking. Breakthrough from the either-or thinking. In John chapter 9, verse 2, Jesus' disciples revealed this kind of thinking when they walked by this man that was born blind, and they turned to Jesus and they asked a question. And here's the question that they asked Jesus: Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? This is Either this man sinned or his parents sinned. That's the only option they had grown up with, to believe that all sickness is a result of a person's sin. And if a person was sick, they must have done something wrong. Their belief was wrong, but that's what they grown up believing. Anytime someone was sick, they thought, oh, he's sinned, or someone in his family sinned. So they look at Jesus and said to Jesus, this man was born blind. Was it a sin that his parents committed? Or is it something that this man did that God knew he was going to do later on in his life that caused him to be blind when he was born? Now their thinking trapped them in seeing this man's situation as totally hopeless. That's what we call the either or thinking. And that's what it does. It traps us. A lot of you are aware of the either or thinking in your business. You've worked through how dangerous it can be to think either this or this, and not to see another option which could open everything else and everything up. You know, businesses that failed had only either or thinking. But have you ever thought about it? That your life, either or thinking, if it's bad for business, it's even worse for your life. Now, either or thinking is either I have to take this job that I know I'm going to be miserable and I'm going to hate it for the rest of my life, or I'm going to lose my house. Or either I have to be lonely the rest of my life, or I just have to marry this person that I'm not really in love with. Either or thinking. And you're feeling trapped in this situation you're in. Either I have to divorce or I have to face the rest of my life in a miserable marriage. But that's the kind of thinking we trap ourselves into. Now, if you're a victim of the either or thinking, then the number one way you feel at this moment is you're trapped. Trapped in a bad marriage, trapped with bad kids, trapped with a bad parent. And you start asking this question, why me? What did I do to deserve this? Where is God when I needed him? Look at what Jesus had to say about this either or thinking. In John chapter 9, verse 3, here's what Jesus said. You are asking the wrong question. You are looking for someone to blame. He said to his disciples, there's no such cause effect here. Look instead. I love this last phrase of Jesus. Look instead for what God can do. That's how you break through this either or thinking. Look instead for what God can do. Look for this God's third option. Begin to see that job that you struggle with, or that I struggled, as an opportunity for ministry to people who are struggling in the same job. A different way of looking at life. Begin to see that marriage that you struggle with as a place that God could heal and restore and strengthen your character and build you up. Place where God could really strengthen me to make it through and show a different kind of love to this world. Begin to see that weakness, that sickness, this man's sickness. Jesus said, that's not a result of his sin nor his father's and mother's sin, but as something that's going to glorify God. An entirely different way of thinking, an entirely different way of seeing things. Now, God's third option always includes the word change. He can change everything. Only he can change things that you and I cannot change. And sometimes he changes our circumstances. But even more often, he changes our heart. He changes our character. He changes our worldview, our mindsets. Now, when you're in an either-or trap, begin to look for an option from God that is so radically different that it can only be from him. Now, this man heard what Jesus and his disciples were talking about, and Jesus walks up to the man and he begins to talk to him. He begins to invite him in a different kind of way of looking at life, a different kind of faith. And in doing that, he takes the second step of faith. First, you break through that either or thinking, saying, God, I know you have an option. I know you have the best answer. And then here's the next step. ask Jesus to help you. Ask Him to help you with that struggle in your life. Ask Him to help you with that trappedness that you feel in that circumstances or that situation you're in. This man's struggle was blindness. Now, as we saw in John 9:7, Jesus told the man, here's the amazing part. He said, go and wash in the pool of Siloam. So the man went and washed, and he came back seeing. Now think about that for a while. I mean, what amazes me about this verse is what had to happen in the middle of it. Between when Jesus said, go wash your eyes, go wash, and the man came back seeing. I can imagine that he thought, go and wash my eyes. Hello, I've done that 1,000 times. He'd probably even wash his eyes in the pool before he even sat there to beg. I can imagine what it must have been like for this blind man to have to make his way through the city streets against all obstacles. And yet Jesus sends him down to the same pool he was going to every day. Jesus sends him to this pool to wash his eyes. And here's the point. When he does, he was able to see. When he obeyed, the miracle happened. Look at how the miracle started. Jesus said, I want you to do something very ordinary. I want you to walk through the street you walk through every day to get to this corner. I want you to go back to that street, wash your eyes like you've washed your eyes before. And then you're going to see. Friends, that's where miracles always start. They always start when somebody does something very ordinary in obedience to God. God says, do this. It seems like an ordinary thing. It was not a big deal for the blind man. It was not a big deal for everybody. You do it, Jesus said, and the miracle happens. See, friends, if you look at Scripture, God wanted to split the Red Sea in two. So he said to Moses, Moses, hold up your rod. Hold up that stick. Now that's pretty ordinary. Wouldn't you think so? Wouldn't you agree? Moses held up the stick and the water split. The sea split in two. Isn't that pretty incredible? God wanted, in another story in the Old Testament, God wanted to, in the New Testament, Jesus wanted to feed 5,000 with a little bit of bread and a little bit of fish. 5 loaves and 2 fish. So what does he do? He gets a little boy to give his lunch so that Jesus can multiply it. Something very ordinary becomes miraculous, something miraculous. God wanted the walls of Jericho in the Old Testament to fall down. So guess what he told them? He says, walk around the walls and blow the trumpet at it. Do you think it was the trumpet that made the walls fall down? Do you think it was the marching? No, it was God. But their ordinary step of obedience allowed God to work on incredible miracles. Let me ask you this. Are you willing to do something ordinary that says in a real way, God, I am depending on you for this one, not on me, God. God, if you don't come through for this, this is going to fall. Now, can you go there? An ordinary start for you today may be just making that phone call. That's what you're feeling in your heart right now. Just make that phone call. I need to make that phone call. I need to apologize. I need to restore a relationship. Or an ordinary start for you might be just starting to read your Bible. Or praying for something again for the first time. It might be handing that Easter invitation to a stranger or to a friend that you have. It might be beginning to just, maybe that ordinary start for you is, maybe it's go to church this coming Easter and check it out. It might be beginning to give when you don't have enough to give. Now, when you make that step, that first ordinary step, that allows God to begin to do miracles of helping you. Now, I want to tell you the first thing you're going to think about. Maybe it is the thing that this guy thought about, right? When Jesus told him that. It's the first thing all of us think. Jesus sends him on this journey down to get healing at the pool. He's probably thinking, oh my gosh, this isn't going to work. It's not going to work. I'm there every day. It's not going to work. Oh, I've tried that. It doesn't work. But I guess it doesn't hurt to try. I don't have anything else to do today. I might as well do it. So he walks down and he washes his eyes, and look what God does. Here's the point, friends. When we take those ordinary nudges, those simple steps that God is telling us, do that, make that phone call, write that letter, begin to pray, begin to open your Bible. Here's the point. Don't be surprised if the first thought in your mind is, man, it's not going to work. I've tried that before already. I've tried that so many times. It's not going to work. It's amazing how God can take the smallest step of faith, even with doubtful people like you and I, and make incredible differences in our lives. Your first reaction is, oh, it isn't going to work. But when you take that first step of faith and you give God a chance to work, the miracle follows. Now, I'd like to give 2 warnings about this as we make these steps of faith and watch God works in our life. 2 simple warnings. First of all, don't confuse the method with the miracle. Don't think that the method that was used is why it happened that way. And we fall into this. I mean, we in Christian community, oh man, we really just kind of sometimes abuse this. In this case, Jesus spit on the ground. Think about that. He spits in the ground. He makes mud out of his spit, and he puts the mud in the man's eyes. And then he says, go to the pool and wash yourself and see what happened. I know it's pretty gross, right? But that's really what had happened if you read chapter 9 of John. Now, if this man had confused the method with a miracle, he could have thought, oh my gosh, it was the dirt. I've got to find that exact spot where Jesus picked up the dirt. I'll be able to give healing to so many people if I only do that. Now, if you read the Bible, you'll find that Jesus healed people in a lot of different ways. He healed people healed people of blindness in different ways. One guy, he said, be healed. And the guy got instantly healed. He was able to see right away. Another guy, he said, be healed. And he slowly began to see. It was not instantly like the other guy. He slowly began to see. And to this guy, another person, he said, to be healed, I'm going to spit in the mud, on the ground, make mud, and put this mud on your eyes, and you're going to go to the pool and wash your eyes. And they all got healed, but different ways. I can just imagine this group getting together after Jesus has died and the resurrection and talking about Jesus healing blind people. One person said, well, he did it to me immediately. And the other person said, no, he did it slowly in my life. And another person said, well, he does it with clay. That's how he does it. He spits and he made clay and he puts it in your eye. They could have a huge argument about how God works in people's lives. Oh, you guys, don't we do this today? We have those kind of arguments today. God does miracle in people's lives, yes. And we start arguing about the method of how he does it. Friends, I want to remind ourselves, including myself, God is a creative God. And he does it in a lot of different ways. And that's the reason why we can never put God in a formula and box him. The miracle is that he does it, that he works in our life. Friends, never try to argue someone out of a miracle. Don't confuse the method with a miracle. Here's the second warning. Don't confuse your participation for God's power. Don't mistake your participation for God's power. Yes, God invites Moses to hold up the stick. And yes, God invites the people of Israel to blow the trumpet at the walls of Jericho and march around. And yes, God invites men to walk down to a pool and be healed. But friends, it was God who was doing the work, but it was their step of obedience in listening to him that made the miracle happen. They couldn't look at this and say, oh, you know what, I did it. I raised the staff and we walked around the wall and that's how it happened. They knew that God had all the credit of all the things that had happened in their life and all the miracles. Now, as you and I look at what this man went through, the sense of desperation he must have felt, the need for help he had from God. We've felt that way many times, don't we? Oh, this cry of the heart that David had in Psalm 75. He said, I am in deep trouble. Rush to my aid, for only you can help me. Save me, O Lord. Don't delay. Wow. Have you ever felt that way? I know I've felt that way many times. I need help, God, and I need it right now. Who hasn't felt that way? We get desperate. We call for help. And when God comes and help, we're so grateful for that help that He's brought in our lives. But unfortunately, for some of us, that's it, right? That's the totality of our relationship with God. We have what I call the 911 in our relationship with God. He comes and helps when you have an emergency, and oftentimes, friends, He does. And we're grateful. But then we hang up the receiver until the next emergency comes. Now get this. Although God does help us, and He loves to help us, He wants us more. He wants more for us than that. And that's the rest of the story of this man. He doesn't leave after he begins to see physically. He wants him to see something better than physical eyes. He wants him to see spiritually. He wants him to give a different kind of faith, a different perspective in life. Now, if you want to have that kind of faith, that reality brings a new kind of joy into your life, you're going to face another barrier immediately. The kind of barrier that this man faced. He begins to see. He goes back to the village. He goes back to his people. He had been around all his life. And if you want to build faith, you've got to, here's the third, you have to look past what other people cannot see. He's healed. He goes back to those who for all his life had watched him beg in the sidewalks. He'd hear their voices. And for the first time, he sees them. He was so excited. You know how it feels when you listen to a radio? Growing up, we don't have TV. Not because I was born in dinosaur age. No, my dad did not believe in TV, so we did not believe in, we don't have a TV at home. So I always listened to radio, drama radio, story radio, songs and all this stuff. And it's like, when the first time I saw these people, I'm like, what? This is how you look like? Like your voice sounds like a little person on the radio, but man, you're such a huge person in reality. He'd hear, this blind man heard their voice. He saw all these people that he'd heard all his life, but he'd never seen their faces. But there was something weird about this. He saw in all their faces, every one of these people who he heard, he saw a look of doubt. Notice what these people were talking amongst themselves. The people said, some said, is he the one? He's the one. Others said, no, he only looks like the guy who's begging in the street. The man himself said, hey, I'm the guy. I'm the blind man. Now get this. Instead of everyone rejoicing that now he can see, He's having to argue them into the fact that he's had this incredible miracle happen in his life. Now, what Jesus does, a miracle in your life, friends, not everybody is going to believe it. In fact, there will be people who will doubt your God encounter. There's always people who will be cynical and critical, and will not believe what God has done in your life or what God can do or will do in your life. There's always people who is easy to be negative. And they'll say, that'll never happen to you. It's, that's okay. Maybe it happened to you, but it's going to be for a season. It's going to wear out. Friends, Just like this guy, this blind man. Don't let the past blind you. Don't let the past blind you to the possibilities that God has for you. Don't let other people's voices blind you to what God can do. It is possible. Now, not only did the people, his friends, his neighbors, and all those begin to question and doubt him, the Jewish leaders and the religious leaders wouldn't even believe that he was blind, that he'd even been blind. They couldn't believe that this miracle had even happened. They tried to write it off, and they argued with this man that it happened, that it actually happened. They brought him in and said and questioned him, interrogated him, tell us that Jesus is a sinner because he couldn't have done these things. They were not satisfied. They summoned his parents to come and verify that he was actually blind from birth. And they just kept interrogating. And they interrogated him not once but twice, over and over. They threatened to throw him out of the church or the temple. And eventually he did get thrown out of the temple because he said that Jesus was the one who made him see. All because of one thing. All because this miracle had happened on a Saturday. The Sabbath to them. A Saturday was a day when you weren't supposed to work. And on that day, that Saturday, when Jesus healed him, they accused Jesus like, he can't be working to work in order to heal this man. In verse 6, it says here, he spit on the ground, made mud with his saliva, and spread it over the blind man's eye. That's what the religious leaders were so upset about, because Jesus broke their law and he healed this blind man. They were so upset about the method that they could not see the miracle. They could not celebrate the fact that this man can now be a contributor instead of a liability in the community. The whole healing miracle event made such a big headline throughout the city. People were just, the religious leader were just confused and were just so upset. And it resulted in all kinds of reaction from the street crowd to the temple elite. Now, in one day, when he received his miracle, think about this blind guy. In one day, when he received this miracle, he was harassed, he was cursed, he was excommunicated from his church, from his religion. Now, in the midst of that intense interrogation, when they were just pressuring him, in John chapter 9, verse 25, here's what he said. It's amazing. He said, one thing I know, I was blind, but now I see. He said, you can shout all you can, but I'm here, and I experience it firsthand. I was blind, but now I see. You cannot say anything else about that. I am the one who experienced it. All your explanation cannot change the fact that right now I was sitting on that street begging all my life, but now I can see. I was blind, I was once blind, but now I see. Now this man that Jesus healed, he's been blind since birth. This was going to be his destiny for as long as he lives. And now he takes the next step of faith. He trusted Jesus to save him. All his life, he sat and begged on the side street of the city. But at this moment, he took that step of believing that Jesus can save him from that kind of life. Now, when Jesus healed him from his physical blindness, he didn't even know who healed him, because as soon as his eyes were open, he went home, probably straight home to his parents and friends and neighbors. And he wasn't even, here's the point, friends, he wasn't even a follower of Jesus Christ. He wasn't a believer of Jesus Christ. During the time he was being interrogated by the religious leaders, he was being around, like, who is this guy who healed you? Who did this to you? He told him, I think it's a prophet. I don't know. It's a man. I don't know. Maybe it's a prophet. And then the second time he said, I don't know. Maybe he's a sinner too, like me. Or maybe he said, he can't be a sinner like me, because no sinner can come to God and do a miracle like this. No. He said Jesus came along and save him from his physical blindness. But friends, this was not all what Jesus wanted to do for him. This was not all Jesus wanted to do for him. Ultimately, what Jesus wanted to do, and Jesus was more interested in healing him from his spiritual blindness. This second encounter he has with Jesus was the great game changer. Now notice, in the lower part of that narrative, in verse 39 of chapter 9, then Jesus told him, I have come into this world to give sight to those who are spiritually blind. That's how all of us started. The spiritually blind. We're all spiritually blind. We hear the truth, but we cannot seem to understand it. The spiritually blind hears the truth, but they cannot see what it means in their life. They cannot see the big picture of what God is doing. They have no idea. Maybe Jesus is in front of him, but he has no idea who this man is. And they were unable to see how the teachings of Christ and what Jesus can do and how it applies in their life. They have trouble confessing the truth because they have difficulty believing that they cannot see. They cannot see the work of God around them, or the works of God in their life. They just can't see. How many of you can relate to that? Before you got connected to God, it seems like you read the Bible or you hear people talk about God, and it just doesn't click. Sometimes, here's the scary part. Sometimes, even when you've been a believer for quite some time, for years, sometimes you still could not grasp it. It's hard to see some things. It's like right now God is saying to you, look what I can do for you. Look at the impossible things I can do for you. Now Jesus said this in John 12:46. He said, I have come as a light to shine in this dark world, so that all who put their trust in me will no longer remain in darkness. Now, notice in this second encounter this man had with Jesus in verse 35, it says there of chapter 9, when Jesus heard, so Jesus heard the commotion that was going on in this little town. When Jesus heard what happened, he found the man and asked, do you believe in the Son of God? The man answered, who is he, sir? Oh, I love the honesty. I love the transparency. I love this guy who just is so innocent. And he said, who is this, sir? Who is this, sir? I want to believe in him. To which Jesus responded, you have seen him, Jesus said, and he is speaking to you. Now get this. Right after Jesus said that, here's how the man responded. Yes, Lord. The man said, I believed. And look at the immediate reaction when he said, I believe to Jesus. He worshiped Jesus. Friends, that completed Jesus' mission in the life of this blind man. Jesus wanted to give this blind man not just physical healing, but a spiritual healing, which is far more important than anything, than any areas of his life. That completed the healing that Jesus wanted to give this man. That's what Jesus was working to do. And that's what Jesus wants to do, not only for this guy, but for you and me. The light comes on, and we understand that Jesus Christ is more than just a wonderful man. That he's more than even a godly messenger or a great teacher. He's God's promise of light for our life. He didn't bring light to the world or share light with the world. He said this, I am the light of the world. He is the one. He is the one who is the light. It's interesting how the light slowly dawned on this man in this chapter. First, in John chapter 9, verse 11, he said Jesus was a man. And the truth of the matter is, some of you see it that way. He's a man who lived in history. That's all I could see. That's all we could see at the beginning. And maybe you're there. Maybe that's all you can see right now. But then later, as he spent more time looking at who Jesus was and how he acted and what he did, now he changes his definition of Jesus to something like this. Oh, Jesus is a prophet. Maybe he is a prophet. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of people think that way. Jesus is a great teacher. He is somebody sent by God. He's a prophet. But it didn't end there. The light begins to really turn on this guy. And on the end of the chapter, he comes face to face with Jesus. And he said this, Jesus is the Lord. I want to believe. And immediately he worshiped Jesus. Some of you, you've asked Jesus to help you again and again and again. And he has. He's helped you with your marriage. He's helped you in your career. Maybe he's helped you in your sickness. He's helped you with making decisions. He's helped you with your parenting and with your relationship. Jesus helped this blind man, friends, before he even believed in him. And he's helped a lot of you before you really trusted him. Maybe some of you right now are saying, oh, I dodged this. I came to this near-death experience. Oh, this car almost hit me, but it was just miraculously I was saved. Could that be possible, God coming into your life and doing that miracle, but you just didn't notice it? Now, this time right now for you to say, I'm not just going to look at this anymore. I'm not just going to look at him anymore as a genie, as somebody to help me when I'm struggling or saving my life. I think I've come to the point, and I invite you to come to the point in your life where you trust him and start a relationship with Jesus Christ. Now, how does that happen? It happens by commitment. It happens by just talking to him in prayer, just like this man. And say, God, I believe. Jesus, I believe. That's when it happened. You say to him, I believe. I trust in you, Jesus. And I want to give you an opportunity to do what I can never do for myself. I want to give you an opportunity to open my spiritual eyes. See, many of us, we don't realize this, but God has been intervening. God has been just coming to our life. You know, someone told me, I didn't even know I was in the hospital, and I didn't even know. I've heard about Jesus Christ, but I'm never a person of faith. I was never religious. But at that moment, I cried and said, God, if you're there, can you please do something about my situation? And he was saying, I didn't even believe in him, but I cried at that time, and God came through for me. And I don't think that's an isolated case. How many of you times when you are in desperate need and you're just like David, God, I need you right now. I'm desperate need. And you just say, oh God, please God. You don't even know what to say, but somehow you call on him. Have you ever considered the fact that God has come through for you in many ways? If you're thinking, as we're talking about seeing, that's what I need to do. I see who Jesus is, and I'm willing to admit that I need light in my life that only he can give. Maybe some of you had been in this journey, your spiritual journey, for quite some time, but this Jesus thing is quite still dim, and you're still not getting it. Today, commit your life to him. Ask Jesus to do what only he can do. Pray a prayer, something like this. The words aren't that important. It's really the attitude of your heart that matters. Say this to Jesus Christ. Jesus, I see today more clearly than I have ever seen before my need to trust you in my life. I need your forgiveness and I need your guidance, Jesus. I want the relationship. I want a relationship with you. I ask you to save me, Jesus. I ask you to rescue me from the things that I struggle with and the sin that is in my life that gets me down and the sense of hopelessness that I have about the future. Would you rescue me? And I ask you to restore me, Jesus, to that relationship with you that brings joy and direction to my life. Jesus, please open my spiritual eyes. I want to see you. And I pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen. Wow. I don't know about you, but this, as I review this story, I've learned this since I was a child, reading it again and kind of just really reflecting and just kind of just really just thinking through this. I was saying, God, thank you. I know I don't see clearly yet. There's so many things that I'm still blinded, but Lord, I trust you that you will finish the work that you started in my life. And friends, He will do that to you. Maybe right now your faith is just like, it's just kind of small right now. My faith is not like those big giant. No, take the step of obedience. Whatever God's telling you to do, whatever that ordinary step is, take it and see the miracle happen in your life. God bless you. And again, I'll say this. Hey, make it to a church this coming Easter. Find a church closest to you. And if you when you want to check us out, please do. You're more than welcome to come and join us. Our session starts at 9:30. We have free breakfast for all of you, and I think we went a little bit overboard. We love to lavish on you and to bless you with the breakfast. So get ready and probably don't eat the night before and just eat this heavy breakfast with us. God bless you all. I love you.